On this episode, I spoke with Grace Clemens, the CEO and founder at SGC Marketing Agency. Grace is a 13-year marketing pro who has been in all kinds of different roles from leadership to IC roles and has really started to find this niche in digital marketing audits. So today we talked about first why freelance marketing is actually an awesome way to work as a marketer, what goes into a full digital marketing audit, and how companies can use actionable insights from those audits to grow their company. So let's dive right into the episode. So let's start just level setting, getting to know you a little bit before we dive into any questions. Would love for you to just kind of walk through the bullet points of your career as a marketer and what's led you to what you're doing now.
Absolutely. So thanks for having me. I'm Grace Clemens, a marketing lead of 13 years. I originally studied at UMass Boston, but transferred overseas to Queen Mary University of London and finished my degree there. I did my thesis with a focus on digital marketing and consumer psychology. I still reference that thesis to this day. I went right into B2B marketing. I worked for a small agency based in London, but working on big FMCG brands such as Carling, Oxfam, Cadbury, Royal Caribbean, you name it. And I was able to build the entire social media from the ground up for that agency. This was right around the time QR scan code kind of came out. So this was actually the first job that I really started doing digital marketing audits because I needed to prove the value of my work. So that's really where it began. Um, I was doing a little bit of freelance consultancy for some smaller companies in London as well for social media marketing and helping them get new business through social media strategy. And then I was also the student ambassador at my university when I transferred overseas to London. And through that, I started doing blogging with the goal to get into fashion digital marketing, which I did. Thanks to a friend that was working at Silkfred, she put me in touch with Emma Watkinson, the CEO of Silkfred, and I got picked up. For 4 years, I worked with Silkfred, and we took the company 5 times growth within those 4 years. I doubled the revenue of the email channel from 1 million to 2 million in the first year, introduced some pretty winning new campaigns, such as Back in Stock. I'll come back to that later. And we took the monthly revenue from about £120,000 per month to 4 million a month on a good month. So we really did a lot of great work there. And there wasn't a marketing hat that I didn't wear at that company. I was head of copywriting. I was doing strategy and reporting and tracking. I was doing campaign direction, all sorts of stuff, and had a great time there. So after about 4 years, I decided I would give up my life in London and everything and go freelance and see what that brought me. And it brought me to X Prize. So I was picked up by a content marketing agency in London called Green Rock Agency with the initiative to focus on their client X Prize. So they are one of the audits that I love to reference because when I came on board, whenever I come on board with any client or business, I always do a digital marketing audit to see where we are and where we're trying to go and how we're going to get there. So in that audit, we re-strategized, or I suggested that we re-strategize Instagram, Twitter, everything really, including, redoing their UTM tracking, tone of voice, all sorts of stuff, emails as well. And just off the bat of those changes, I revisited another audit and we saw sessions via Twitter up by 870%, sessions via Instagram up by 195%. And we also saw, impressions, engagement, new users up across the board. Like everything on that strategy went green for us. So I highlight the Twitter one because that was an ultimate immediate win for us. But then after I had, had this finding, Elon Musk came on board and donated 100 million for its X Prize carbon removal. So that 870%, which was justified by an audit that I had done to suggest it in the strategy, that became infinite for us because that was the only channel on Twitter that X Prize was able to communicate with Elon Musk. And he ended up retweeting copy that I wrote for X Prize to, I think, 52 million followers. So that's one of my favorite examples to use in terms of how audits can really back up your strategies and be super valuable. So I was with X Prize for about a year. And then after X Prize, I worked with a number of different companies from e-com to fintech to hospitality. There really isn't an industry I haven't touched. And then I moved on into SaaS and I was the marketing lead for a SaaS company called Process Driven. I kind of spearheaded strategy, budget, team management, all of that kind of stuff, as well as social and emails and doing audits for that company as well. Fast forward 13 years later, here I am. I'm freelance again. I'm working with e-commerce brands, specifically on digital marketing audits and launching my agency, which is website is coming soon. That agency is there to support with this full service freelance team. In my audits at the end, I propose actionable insights, which is really right, which is really basically saying, here's the main findings and here's what we're going to do with them. Here's how we're going to proceed. How we're going to shift your strategy. So you can either, as a business, implement that in house or you can outsource. And my agency is an option to help you with all of those outsourcing things. So that's a small snippet of the past 13 years of my career. I'm sure I could dig out more, but that's where I'll start for now.
No, I love it, and I definitely want to dive into marketing audits as something we haven't talked a ton about on the podcast. But before we go too deep into that, I do want to ask about the freelance side of things. Um, Having done all of it, leading marketing teams, being an IC at some point on a marketing team, and then going freelance and building your own thing. What is it about freelance, especially as a marketer, that was attractive to you? And yeah, I'd love to just kind of start there and get your thoughts on freelance for marketers.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's completely about flexibility and being able to live where I want. I moved overseas 14 years ago. So for me, I like the ability to go live somewhere for half the year. For me, that's what it is. But more so being there for my family as well, I think, when I moved overseas to London, I got more holidays so I could go back home. But there was always a struggle for me of how many times I couldn't fly home to be there for my family when I needed to. And I think, this past week is a great example. I'm remote, I'm freelance, and I was overseas for a few months in Costa Rica, but my mom asked if I could come home and help her move. And because I'm freelance, flexible, and remote, I was able to just change those flights, no questions asked, come over and be there for my mom, which to me is really makes all the hard work worth it in being able to be there for your family. I think a lot of freelancers would agree with that.
Totally. Let's dive into digital marketing audits here. First and foremost, I'd love to dive into if we can go into the who, what, where, and why of all of it, but maybe we start with just the what. Because audit, I think most people understand what that means in general, but if y- if you could break down the components of what this actually looks like, if you're working with a net new client that needs a digital marketing audit first, what does that actually look like for them? What are the components that you're breaking it down to, and what are they kind of getting from that?
Absolutely. So it depends on what stage I'm at with the client or the business to define exactly what that audit looks like. So if you're coming just on board, I'm going to do a complete deep dive of every channel that we want included. That includes organic and that includes paid. If we're revisiting you, the main difference here is going to be what the goals are, what the benchmarks are. If it's a first time audit, I might be setting benchmarks and goals versus we're going to have a lot more information on if we met those goals and targets in the next audit. So what that kind of looks like in terms of ongoing audits is you'll have, an executive summary, which really summarizes the top KPIs, the revenue, the conversion rates, the open rates, the engagement rates, steering clear of away from any vanity metrics. This is the executive summary. Here's what happened. Here's where we need to go next. Then it's going to include the goals, the benchmarks, the KPIs achieved. Then we're going to go deep into data analysis, and that is usually broken down by channel. So for some people, for some e-commerce businesses, they're going to be using Klaviyo versus Mailchimp. So what I'll do is deep dive into the email marketing channel and see what automations are working the best. Are there any automations missing? What campaigns perform the best? What drove the most revenue, but also what performed the worst as well to see what can we repurpose and what can we ditch? What can we get rid of? So I'm going to deep dive really into all those emails and do a clear breakdown of which are the best performers, what were the subject lines, what were the preview texts, what caused the most click-through rate, what caused the most revenue. I'll look at peak traffic times, but this is obviously separated by each platform. I'll then go into platform specific top performing content. So I will look at Facebook, for example, and say, okay, well, we can see that press coverage did the best for you for the past 30 days. We can see that a petition that you had been promoting. We can see that means that you have done or performed well, thought leadership, educational posts, that kind of stuff. So I'm really going to highlight here are the best performers, but here are the themes that they fall under and making sure that those align with your content pillars as well. So looking at top performing content across every single platform, whatever ones you're on, and then looking at, okay, which goals did we set in the previous audit that we've now met? And what KPIs, did we reach? And then going on, the final and the most important slide of every single audit is the actionable insights, because that is the insights that you could take action on. So if I brought this audit to X price and said, hey, look, this is 870% increase, that's going to go into the actionable insights that Twitter is a winning channel. We know it's working. Here's how it's been working. What does that mean for the strategy? That means going forward, we're going to be posting 3 times as many gifts because we know gifts did well last season, that kind of stuff. So, really, the most important slides that the people who are going to be reading this report is the executive summary and the actionable insights. For me, I obviously love the data insights. All of that data is going to be in there for if you want to review it, but that's really there to just show you how I got to where we got to in the actionable insights. So that's kind of a quick summary of the audits. I would just kind of add as a closeout is that, I offer 2 kinds, which is a social media audit versus social media and email. So that's going to be different in terms of, how deep do you want to go and how your strategy sits. In most cases, people will need email considered because email coincides with your social media strategy. So I'll leave it there.
Yeah, for sure. And with those audits, when you're looking at especially e-commerce companies that you're working with, are there any like clear patterns of consistent mistakes that come up or big opportunities that people usually are not taking advantage of that are just clearly a pattern across e-commerce?
I think UTM tracking is the biggest one that I see across e-commerce, but across all industries, if I'm honest. I think getting your UTM tracking right and making sure it's consistent across the entire company and across all of your platforms, that's going to ensure that your audits are super, super accurate. So that is another thing that I've helped many, many brands, both B2B and B2C, get right is here's how we're going to do UTM tracking across both email and social. So it's cohesive. And so your brand can really, if you have investors donating millions of dollars, you need to ensure that that data you're giving is as accurate as possible. So that would be UTM tracking.
Yeah, that makes sense. And when you're presenting your findings to a client or whatever, how do you go about working with them from that point on? Like the actionable insights are there. How do you think about the next part of that relationship, which is implementing things and tracking how it actually performs? Yeah, I'm just curious, like the next step after an audit.
Yeah, well, usually I'm pretty involved with the brands in terms of the next steps. So really it comes down to how are we going to implement this in your strategy? A good example to kind of use here would be for Myova, which was an e-commerce brand based in the UK. We noticed, or I noticed in the audit that there was a color that performed very, very well on social media and it hadn't been developed within the emails. So that was something that we pulled from the audit and we said, right, we're going to redesign your templates and we're going to find these colors to ensure that they match with the brand and everything is going to be used with these colors instead going forward. Immediate win. I think we saw like a 200% increase in revenue. In that case, I was working very closely with the CEO where I helped write out that strategy where I said, look, we're going to be doing 4 campaigns a month. They're going to have this kind of new template, including these colors, which was found in the audit. And we're going to do these kind of themes. Another example being we introduced Doc and Stock. That was something that I had introduced in Silkfred. A great example of how audits can really prove those findings for you because hypothetically, as an industry expert, I could say, I know that back in stock will work for you, but the data is really what proves my point there. So, back to Myova again, we introduced stock and stock. And when the audit was done again a month later, we saw that that drove, an immediate win in terms of revenue. And that became an ongoing campaign for them. Same with Silkfriend. It was driving anywhere from 10 to 20,000 per campaign. So that's where the audits really come in there. I think something that's important about being a marketer is, we are industry experts. We know what we're doing. We've been in the game, but everything is subjective, right? Everything is content is subjective. What you think is beautiful versus what I think is beautiful or engaging online. The data is where you have to depend on to really back up those industry expert hypotheses that you have. So I would use my OVA as an example of how I implement them is really I just help the CEO or whoever is working on the strategy with me. You really just outline it and say, here's how it's going to happen. And with my OVA, again, I was working a lot closer with them. So I helped with even setting up emails, sending them out, writing the copy, you name it.
And within the industry of marketing, everything changes so often. From 10 years ago, when I started, SEO was totally different. Content's totally different. In terms of ads, TikTok didn't exist. There's like all this stuff that's totally different. It's always happening. I'm just curious how you keep up with the trends that matter most, especially for the things that go into the audits that you need to be an expert on. What are your favorite sources or ways to be ahead of the curve as a marketer?
Yeah. So for me, I do a lot of networking. I'm always talking to marketers. I'm always, just discussing what's going on in the industry because there is so much of it. I think that's what's beautiful about, people in my industry is I can chat with marketers and we will literally just exchange knowledge with each other because one of us will be focusing on one platform and another. But social media is an obvious one for me. That is where I spend a lot of my time engaging with fellow marketers and also the platforms themselves. I think Instagram is great about keeping us up to date with changes, but it is a lot to keep up with. So I think, part of it is social media, part of it is keeping in touch with your fellow marketers and learning from all of each other, our mistakes, our wins. There are also a couple of newsletters that I subscribe to, Girl Power Marketing. She's a newer one on the scene, but I'm looking forward to meeting her in Barcelona at the Social Media Summit next week. And then, we are social media. So I keep up with those kind of things, but I find actually I get my best updates from just by using the platforms. I think the switch from Google Analytics to GA4 was a great example. I really just stayed close, thumb to the pulse kind of thing, keeping up with what was gearing up for that change because it was such a big change. Same with third party cookies. There's a lot of rumors going on right now about things getting pushed back for that. But that's something that I'm just keeping my ear to the ground of seeing like, okay, what's going on? What do we need to know? And then using the platforms themselves. I think the more you use the platform, the better you can market on it.
Well, this has been awesome. We have not talked audits at all here, so I appreciate your insights and want to just give you a chance here as we close out to chat through where people can find you, what you're working on currently, and if you have any parting words for marketers or words of advice.
Yeah. So you can find me at gracieclemens.com. That's GRACIECLEMENS.com. You can book an audit straight on there. I'm offering free 15-minute audits as well if you want a taste of that. And you can also find me on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/Grace Clemens. And I will be launching my marketing agency website soon. So definitely keep an eye out for that. I'm excited for that launch. And in terms of advice for marketers, I would give the advice that was given to me a few years ago, which is basically have one target. If you have more than one target, you'll miss the boat. So I think as marketers, we have so many hats that we wear. There's so many specialties, and I've never met one marketer who just does one thing. So it's up to us to really hone in on that niche and decide what it is that we feel passionate about. For that way that we feel passionate about. For me, that was e-commerce brands, and that was a very important conversation I had with someone the past couple of years that made a big difference for me. So don't be afraid to niche it down and pick the one thing that's really gonna make you enjoy your work the most.